And more good news for the president in Pennsylvania, where a major victory for a free and fair election has been won. Today, Pennsylvania Judge Patricia McCullough ordered that the state's certification of the vote be halted temporarily. She scheduled a hearing for Friday morning in the case brought by Congressman Mike Kelly and congressional candidate Sean Parnell. They allege in that suit the state's mail-in ballot law is unconstitutional. The Trump campaign, not directly involved in the litigation, but would stand to benefit, of course, if in fact that law is held to be unconstitutional. Pennsylvania's radical dim Attorney General Josh Shapiro said he is appealing to the state Supreme Court. Shapiro is a radical by any definition, and he is the same official who claimed before the election that President Trump would lose if all the votes, as he put it, were added up. Our first guest tonight is the attorney leading the charge to throw out Pennsylvania's mail-in ballots, representing Congressman Mike Kelly and congressional candidate Sean Parnell. Gregory Tufel joins us from Pittsburgh. Gregory, good to have you with us, and congratulations on this win. Hearing scheduled for Friday. What is your expectation now that the case will be considered?
Well, thanks for having me on, Lou. Good to be here. Our expectation is that the hearing will proceed, but the other side has filed an appeal to the PA Supreme Court begging them to take over the case. So we'll have to see, developments keep coming.
Developments keep coming. What does that mean?
Well, the Supreme Court may step in and take over the case, so we have to wait and see whether that'll happen. But in either case, it's neither good nor bad. The Supreme Court could grant the same relief we're seeking from the Commonwealth Court, and should, because the law at issue clearly is unconstitutional.
But the Supreme Court hasn't been ruling in the favor of the president in this, and it's as I understand it, it's a heavily Democrat, 5-2 Democrat judges on that Supreme Court?
Right. One would hope they don't simply vote based on their party's interests, but rather on what the law is and what the Constitution says. And in line with, there's two Supreme Court precedents going back 150 years, holding that the Pennsylvania Constitution allows two ways to vote. One is in person, the other is absentee ballots. You meet the criteria for excuse voting, and there's four different criteria: if you're in the military, if you have a disability or an illness that prevents you from voting, etc. And in order to expand those to no excuse mail-in balloting, which is what Act 77 did here in PA, you have to do a constitutional amendment. You have to give the PA voters a chance to vote on a constitutional amendment before you can implement widespread mail-in voting. And that's what's at issue in this case.
This case is also not unlike the case that has arisen in a number of other states, battleground states specifically, but others as well, in which mail-in ballots were obviously the prized adjustment in this election year by the radical Dems. They pulled it off in a number of states. And it looks to be a coordinated conspiracy to foul the vote. And they did it to fairly well, don't you think?
Well, there's no question that mail-in ballots are far more susceptible of fraud. And there's a lot of irregularities and problems that we've seen in their implementation of mail-in balloting in Pennsylvania that calls into question the integrity of the elections. And it's one of the reasons why the voters, if given the chance to vote on whether to allow widespread mail-in balloting, should vote it down. So what is the remedy then? If indeed the judge rules that this is unconstitutional, it proceeds through, what are we talking about as a consequence? Mail-in ballots that went beyond the 3 days initially established, went beyond Election Day as originally established, would be thrown out. What would be the consequence you seek as a remedy in law? So we're not addressing our case to mail-in ballots received as of a certain date, whenever they were cast. The mail-in ballots without proper excuse as an absentee ballot are not lawful under the PA Constitution, and none of those ballots should be included in the count for PA's vote totals for any of the races, president or on down ballot. And the remedy would be to block certification of any result that includes those votes. They would have to exclude those votes from any count for this election, as well as the law would be declared unconstitutional and voided for any future elections.
Yeah, at one level, it is so simple. The Constitution says election day, and it is turned into election months. That hardly seems to be within the meaning of the word, does it? Gregory Tufel, thanks for being with us. We appreciate your insight and wish you well. Thank you. The win in Pennsylvania comes as members of the Trump legal team today met with Republicans from the Pennsylvania State Senate in Gettysburg. There they laid out the examples of fraud and corruption in the Pennsylvania election. In that meeting, several witnesses said they saw fraud in the election. One witness addressed issues with the voting machines used by Pennsylvania, declaring those machines were designed to be manipulated. Listen to retired Colonel Phil Walter, who spent half of his 30-year career on information warfare and election manipulation around the world.
These systems are not what you've been told. They are connected to the internet and servers outside of the U.S. They're connected from top to the bottom in the middle. There is no transparency, as our previous witnesses mentioned, as to how the voter information is processed, how and where it's stored. The voting record is able to be modified and or deleted by operators, administrators, and outside threats. Operators can assign votes for write-in ballots, blank ballots, or error ballots in large numbers so that they can be directed toward one candidate or another at the operator's or supervisor's discretion. And many experts have published how easily these machines can be hacked to manipulate votes. As a matter of fact, one of our white hat hackers previously discovered a malware that's present on the servers that captures every login and every password of every operator down to the precinct level that logs into one of these systems. That's just like giving the password to your bank account out, putting it on the dark web. It's not going to be there very long.
And the evidence today piling up in that hearing room against the propriety of the election in Pennsylvania. President Trump was watching those proceedings. He called in to thank everyone involved, leaving no doubt to just how important today's meeting is in the battle for the White House.
And nobody would have said we even had a chance of losing. And all you had to do is take a look at the numbers at 10 o'clock in the evening when everybody thought the election was virtually over. And then very weird things happened, but they're not weird to professionals, and they're not weird to Dominion and other people that operate machines, and they're not weird to the people that handle the ballots where they were flooding the market. People were getting 2 and 3 and 4 ballots in their home. People that were dead were signing up for ballots. Not only were they coming in and putting in a ballot, but dead people.
And for more on today's meeting in Gettysburg, correspondent David Spunt is on location and has the very latest for us. David.
Hey, Lou, good evening. President Trump was supposed to be here in Gettysburg in person today. Plans changed. He ended up calling in on the phone, but a lot of supporters here as well today. President Trump did make that phone call inside. Lou, it's not clear if today's meeting was just to shine some light on some potential irregularities and some problems, or actually change some of the results in Pennsylvania. Even though the president was not here today, his two attorneys were. His lead attorneys, Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis, both were here. Now, before Republican senators and House members from Pennsylvania, Giuliani introduced several witnesses from Pennsylvania who worked as poll workers and canvassers. Mr. Giuliani continues to allege fraud in Pennsylvania. Now, despite his legal setbacks, the president praised Giuliani over the phone. Listen to this, Lou.
And I want to thank Rudy Giuliani for having the courage to do this, because there are other lawyers that backed down because they were being screamed at. Rudy is the greatest mayor in the history of New York, and there's a reason. He's got great courage, and he doesn't care. He wants to do what's right.
Outside the hotel, at least 100 supporters of the president chanted 4 more years. Others screamed 2024, hoping he'll run again. Interesting to note, though, that there were witnesses here, but this was not a court hearing or a legal proceeding. There was no judge. The claims here today stood a different standard than those made in court under oath. And you know, Giuliani and his team has taken this case to several courts. Now, Giuliani and Ellis continue to fight in Pennsylvania despite votes being certified in favor of President-elect Biden. The Pennsylvania governor made that announcement yesterday, saying and certifying those results for President-elect Joe Biden. Also to point out today, Lou, that the witnesses here today were not under oath. They were not sworn in, but the Trump legal team did point out that many of them had submitted affidavits under the penalty of perjury. Lou?
You sound rather dismissive of the expert witnesses, including PSYOPs, forensic computer experts that were testifying as to the irregularities and the anomalies of the election. In point of fact, it was an informational hearing, and you are, I'm sure, aware that a state judge has intervened to temporarily stop the certification of the vote in Pennsylvania as a result of claims by, amongst others, Congressman Mike Kelly and Sean Parnell, both Republicans, declaring in their lawsuit that the entire proceeding was unconstitutional. David Spahn, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.